The school bell rang, echoing down the marble corridors of St. Andrew's Academy, one of the most prestigious private schools in the city. Students in neat uniforms hurried out of classrooms, their chatter filling the air like a buzzing hive. Among them walked Alina, a gentle, soft-spoken woman in her late 20s, dressed modestly in a flowing maternity dress. She carried a small tote bag, her hand protectively resting on her baby bump. Despite her delicate condition, her eyes held warmth. As she guided children across the hallway, helping them line up for their parents to collect them, Alina wasn't a teacher. She was married to Victor Harrington, one of the wealthiest young millionaires in the city. But unlike most wives of the elite, Alina found comfort in spending her mornings volunteering at the school library, organizing books, reading to children, and assisting the staff. She was quiet, reserved, and not one to seek attention. Yet her very presence at the school was an open secret. People whispered about her marriage. Why is she married to Victor Harrington? Did you hear? She used to be a waitress before he picked her up. She doesn't belong in his world. Those whispers followed her every step. Victor had once been charming, the type of man who could light up a room with his smile, but the shine had long since faded. Behind closed doors, his arrogance, temper, and obsession with control had turned him into someone Alina barely recognized. He didn't approve of her volunteer work at the school. He didn't approve of her modest clothes, her kindness, her refusal to mingle with his wealthy circle, and lately, he didn't approve of her pregnancy either. That morning, Lena was busy stacking a pile of children's storybooks when she felt her phone buzz. She glanced at the screen and froze. It was a message from Victor. "Meet me at the school courtyard." Now, her heart sank. His tone was always sharp, always commanding. She carefully put the books aside and hurried toward the courtyard, clutching her belly protectively. Outside, under the towering oak tree near the school gates, Victor stood waiting. Tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed in an expensive navy blue suit, he looked every inch the millionaire businessman. His black luxury car was parked nearby, drawing the envious glances of students and parents alike. But Victor's face was twisted in irritation. "You kept me waiting." He snapped the moment Alina approached. I'm sorry, Victor," she said softly. "I was helping. I don't care what you were doing." He cut her off, his voice rising. "How many times do I have to remind you that you're my wife? You're not here to play the role of a schoolmaid." Several parents glanced their way, uncomfortable but unwilling to interfere. Elena's cheeks burned with shame. She lowered her gaze, speaking gently. "Victor, I was just what?" His words cut like knives. "Just embarrassing me. Just lowering my status in front of the entire city by acting like some charity worker." Alina swallowed back tears. "It's not about status. I feel useful here and the children." But before she could finish, Victor's anger boiled over in front of parents, students, and teachers. He slapped her hard. Across the face, the sound echoed. Gasps erupted from the small crowd. A child yelped.
Dad.
Alina staggered back, clutching her cheek, her eyes wide with shock. Silence fell, heavy and suffocating. Then a commanding voice rang out. "Enough." Everyone turned. Standing on the steps of the school building, wearing a navy blue skirt suit and glasses perched on her nose, was Principal Margaret Lawson. Her expression was calm, but her eyes burned with a quiet fury. And then came the truth that would shake Victor to his core. Margaret Lawson wasn't just the school's principal. She was Elena's mother. And not just her mother, she was a respected judge feared in the courtroom for her uncompromising sense of justice. The courtyard went still. Victor's arrogance faltered for a split second as he locked eyes with the woman who had the power to ruin him not just personally, but legally. Principal Margaret descended the stairs slowly, her heels clicking with authority. She stopped beside her daughter, placing a steady hand on Elena's trembling shoulder. "You will not lay a hand on her again," she said coldly. Victor clenched his jaw, forcing a smirk. "With all due respect, Principal, this is a family matter." "Oh, Mr. Harrington," Margaret replied, her voice like steel. "This is a matter of law, and you've just committed an offense in front of dozens of witnesses." Gasps rippled. Again, through the crowd, Parents began murmuring. Students whispered. The scene had turned into a public scandal. Elena's tears finally spilled, not from the slap, but from the sudden weight of her mother's support. For the first time in years, she felt safe. Victor, on the other hand, realized something he never thought possible. His wealth and power wouldn't protect him this time. Not against her. The crowd was still frozen in shock, eyes darting between Elena's tear-streaked face and Victor's rigid posture. Margaret's presence commanded silence, her expression carved from stone. "School is dismissed for the day," Margaret declared, her voice cutting through the air like a gavel striking. "Teachers, escort your students inside." Parents began to whisper among themselves. Children were quickly ushered away, and the courtyard cleared, leaving only a few stunned onlookers lingering near the gates. Victor adjusted his suit jacket, trying to regain his composure. His pride wouldn't allow him to appear shaken. He gave a cold laugh. "So this is how it is, Margaret? You'll humiliate me in front of an entire school?" Margaret met his stare without blinking. Humiliated. "Yourself, Victor. You've shown the world who you really are." Victor's jaw tightened. He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice so only she and Elena could hear. "Careful, Judge Lawson. You may think the law is on your side, but remember your daughter is my wife. She carries my child. Whatever happens behind closed doors is our business, not yours." Elena flinched at his words. Margaret's eyes narrowed. "She's my daughter, and this is my school. And as a judge, I know very well what the law says about assault. Do not mistake my restraint for weakness." Victor smirked, though a flicker of unease crossed his face. "We'll see." He straightened, shot Elena a chilling glare, and turned on his heels, striding toward his luxury car. The tires screeched as he sped away, leaving behind the scent of burning rubber and tension thick enough to choke on. Later that evening, inside Elena's modestly decorated bedroom at Margaret's house, she sat on the edge of her bed, hands folded protectively over her stomach. Slap still stung, but it was nothing compared to the storm inside her chest. Margaret entered quietly, carrying a tray with a glass of warm milk. She placed it on the bedside table and sat beside her daughter. "Elena." Margaret's voice softened, her stern mask melting. "You don't have to stay with him anymore. You and the baby will be safe here." Tears welled in Elena's eyes. "Mama, I married him because I thought he loved me. He promised me a life, a family, respect. But he's changed. He sees me as nothing. And now," she broke down. Sobbing into her mother's arms, Margaret stroked her daughter's hair. "It's over. You don't need his money, his name, or his approval. You have me. The law will protect you." Elena shook her head. "But Mama, he'll never let me go. You don't know him like I do, Victor. When he loses control, he becomes dangerous." Margaret's eyes hardened. "Then we'll take control away from him, legally, permanently." Meanwhile, across town, Victor sat in his penthouse office, a glass of whiskey in hand. The city lights glittered below, but his mind was far from calm. He paced back and forth, replaying the scene at the school. The whispers, the gasps, the look in Margaret Lawson's eyes. He slammed his glass down on the desk, shattering it. "No judge, no woman tells me what I can and cannot do," he growled. His personal assistant, a nervous young man named Daniel, stepped forward cautiously. "Sir, there are already articles online. It's parents posting about what happened. It's spreading." Victor's head snapped toward him. "What do you mean?" Daniel held out his phone. "Videos, sir. Someone recorded it. It's on social media. Thousands of views already." Victor snatched the phone and watched in horror as the video played the slap, Elena stumbling, Margaret confronting him. His perfect public image, his reputation as a model millionaire, was being torn apart in real time. His fist tightened around the phone until the screen cracked. "Find out who posted this," he ordered, his voice cold as ice. "It down," Daniel hesitated. "Sir, it's too late. It's everywhere." Victor's chest heaved. For the first time in years, he felt powerless. But then, slowly, a sinister smile curved his lips. "If Margaret wants a war," he muttered, pouring himself another drink, "then a war she shall have. And Elena, his eyes darkened. She learned that no one escapes me. Back at Margaret's house, Elena sat in the dimly lit kitchen, sipping tea. She felt safer, under her mother's roof, but anxiety gnawed at her. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. You think you can hide from me? Remember who owns you? Her hands trembled. Margaret walked in at that moment, snatching the phone. From Elena's grip, she read the message, her face tightening. That's enough, Margaret said firmly. Tomorrow, we're going to court. Elena's eyes widened. Mama, no he'll retaliate. Margaret squeezed her hand. Let him try. He has money, yes. But I have the law. Last time he's crossed the wrong woman. Elena wanted to believe her. But deep down, she knew Victor wasn't the type to surrender. He was plotting. Whatever he planned next would be dangerous. The next morning, the courthouse buzzed with energy. Reporters hovered outside, their cameras aimed at the entrance like a firing squad. The viral video had ignited a media frenzy. Millionaire slaps pregnant wife at school. Splashed across every headline. Inside, Margaret guided Elena gently through the crowd, shielding her daughter from flashing cameras. Elena clutched her mother's hand tightly, her face pale but determined. She could feel eyes on her, whispers trailing behind them. Victor arrived moments later in a tailored black suit, flanked by two sharp-suited attorneys. His smile was polished, but his eyes glowed with quiet rage. He moved as though he owned the very marble floors beneath his feet. The courtroom was tense. As soon as the judge entered, the case was called Elena Lawson versus Victor Harrington Domestic Assault and Protection Order hearing. Victor's lawyer, a tall man with a silver tongue named Richard Cole, stood first. Your Honor, he began smoothly, this case is a tragic misunderstanding fueled by emotion, gossip, and internet sensationalism. My client, Mr. Harrington, is a respected philanthropist and businessman. The so-called incident was nothing more than a private marital disagreement, blown out of proportion. Elena's hand shook as she listened. Margaret reached over, squeezing her daughter's arm in silent reassurance. Richard continued, pacing with confidence. We live in an age where anyone with a phone can record a moment, strip it of context, and turn it into a weapon. But marriage is complex, Your Honor. My client loves his wife. He provides for her, protects her, and is eagerly anticipating the birth of their child. To drag his name through the mud over one misinterpreted moment is not justice, it is vengeance. Few reporters scribbled eagerly. Victor smirked, but then Margaret rose. She wasn't just Elena's mother here. She was a judge, a woman who knew the law inside and out. Your Honor, she said firmly, with all due respect to the opposing counsel, what the world witnessed was not a misinterpreted moment. It was an act of violence against a pregnant woman, my daughter, and this is not an isolated incident. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Victor's smirk faltered. Margaret opened a folder, laying out documents and photographs. There is a history here threatening text messages, controlling behavior, financial isolation. We have evidence of intimidation. And yesterday, in front of an entire schoolyard, in front of parents, teachers, and children. Mr. Harrington struck my daughter. The judge leaned forward. Do you have witnesses? Yes, Your Honor, Margaret turned. Several parents who were present are ready to testify. Teachers as well? And may I remind the court the video speaks for itself. Victor's jaw tightened. His attorney quickly objected, but the judge overruled. The video was admitted as evidence. The screen lit up, replaying the shocking moment for all to see. Victor's raised hand, Elena stumble, the crowd's horrified gasps. The silence that followed was deafening. Elena lowered her head, tears sliding down her cheeks. Victor, however, sat stiffly, his fists clenched beneath the table. The judge's eyes shifted between them. This court takes such matters very seriously. Temporary protection orders will be considered. Margaret rested her hand on Elena's back, whispering, You're safe. We're winning. But across the courtroom, Victor leaned toward Richard, his voice low and venomous. Fix this. I don't care how. Richard nodded, his expression tightening. That wasn't just a case anymore. It was war. That evening, Victor retreated to his penthouse, pacing like a predator trapped in a cage. The headlines were relentless, the footage unavoidable. Investors were pulling back. His image, his empire, was all slipping. He stood before the mirror, staring at his reflection. His own eyes looked back, cold and furious. "They think they can destroy me," he hissed. "They think they can turn Alina against me, but she is mine." Pulling out his phone, he made a call. "Daniel, contact every parent who was at that school. Pay them, threaten them, I don't care. Make sure they retract their statements and find dirt on Margaret Lawson. Anything." On the other end, Daniel hesitated. "Sir, with respect, Judge Lawson is powerful. If you go after her," Victor cut him off. "Do what I say. No one humiliates me and walks away." Meanwhile, Alina sat in her childhood room at Margaret's house. The day's events weighed heavily on her. First time, she had spoken against Victor in court. For the first time, she had felt the possibility of freedom. But that possibility came with fear. Victor wasn't the kind of man to surrender gracefully. He was already plotting. She could feel it. She placed her hand on her stomach, whispering, "Softly, I'll protect you, little one, no matter what." Margaret entered quietly, carrying papers. The judge granted a temporary restraining order. "Cannot come near you until the final hearing." Lena exhaled in relief, but Margaret's eyes were sharp. "This isn't over. He'll fight back, but we'll be ready. I promise you that." Lena looked up at her mother, her eyes glistening. For the first time in months, hope flickered in her chest. But far across the city, Victor was raising a glass of whiskey to the skyline, whispering to himself with a chilling smile, "They haven't seen the last of me. Not by a long shot." The night was restless. Rain lashed against the windows of Margaret's house, and Elena tossed in bed, her hands curled around her stomach. Every crack of thunder sounded like Victor's voice echoing in her head. Even with the restraining order, she couldn't shake the fear that he would find a way past it. Margaret, however, was wide awake in her study, sipping coffee while reviewing files. She wasn't just Elena's mother anymore. She was preparing like a judge, anticipating every dirty trick Victor's lawyers might attempt. She knew men like him, powerful, arrogant, and unwilling to lose. Meanwhile, across town in his luxury penthouse, Victor was in full command mode. His phone buzzed with calls from associates, lawyers, and fixers. He paced, barking orders. Buy off the parents. 10,000 each, more if needed. Tell them if they testify, they'll never see another contract or donation in this city. Daniel, his assistant, nervously nodded. "Yes, sir. And about Judge Lawson." "We couldn't find dirt," but Victor snapped. "Then make some." Rumors stick faster than facts. Leak to the press that she's biased, that she's abusing her position to help her daughter. "If I go down, she's coming with me." His rage was volcanic. He slammed his whiskey glass on the marble counter, shards scattering. His eyes glowed with a dangerous mixture of humiliation and obsession. The next day, Margaret drove Alina to a prenatal checkup. Paparazzi swarmed the clinic parking lot, their cameras flashing. "Mrs. Harrington, did your husband really strike? You, Alina? Is your mother abusing her position as judge to influence the case?" Alina froze, stunned. Margaret's jaw tightened. Victor had already set the smear campaign in motion. Inside the clinic, Elena's doctor frowned. "You need to stay calm for the baby. Stress this high can be harmful." Alina tried to nod, but her voice trembled. "How can I stay calm when Victor won't stop?" "He'll never stop." Margaret placed a firm hand on her daughter's shoulder. "Then we won't either. He underestimates us, Alina, but we will outlast him." That evening, as Alina sat quietly in the living room, Margaret received a shocking call. It was one of the parents from the school, the very ones who had agreed to testify. I can't do it," the mother whispered. "Victor Harrington contacted my husband. He said if we testify, we'll lose his company's contracts. My husband could lose his job. I'm so sorry, Judge Lawson." Margaret's chest tightened. One by one, her list of witnesses began to shrink. Victor's influence was reaching everywhere. When she hung up, Elena's eyes were filled with dread. "He's winning, isn't he?" Margaret shook her head, though her voice was heavy. "He's fighting dirty. But this isn't over. We still have the video on you. That's enough." But Elena wasn't convinced. She knew Victor. He wasn't just fighting for reputation. He was fighting for control of her, of their child. Late that night, Margaret's house grew quiet. But Elena woke suddenly to the faint sound of gravel crunching outside. Heart racing, she crept to the window. A dark car idled at the end of the driveway. Its headlights were off, but she could feel someone watching. Her blood ran cold. She whispered, clutching her belly, "Victor." Before she could wake Margaret, the car revved and sped away into the darkness. The next morning, Margaret stormed into her office, determined to strike back. She pulled strings of her own, contacting trusted colleagues in the legal system. If Victor Harrington thinks intimidation will silence witnesses, we'll file obstruction charges. If he thinks rumors will taint me, I'll drag every skeleton from his closet into the light. Her voice was steel, but deep inside she worried. Victor wasn't just powerful, he was desperate. And desperate men were dangerous. Meanwhile, Victor sat in his office watching the latest news broadcast. The media had started picking up his side of the story. Is Judge Lawson interfering in her daughter's case? He smirked, swirling his drink. Perfect. Let them question her integrity. Let them doubt her. Soon Elena will come crawling back. She won't survive without me. But what Victor didn't know yet was that his empire had cracks. Some of his closest allies were beginning to question whether staying loyal to him was worth the scandal. The war was escalating. The courtroom battle was only the beginning, and both sides knew it would end in complete destruction for one of them. The storm outside mirrored the storm brewing inside Elena's heart. Days had passed since the restraining order, and yet Victor's presence lingered everywhere in the news, in whispered rumors. In the quiet terror of knowing he was watching, Margaret had doubled security around the house, but Elena still felt exposed. Every ring of the phone, every car that slowed near the driveway, sent her pulse racing. Then came the call that shattered what little peace remained. It was from the school principal, her voice trembling with fear. "Mrs. Lawson, I think you should know. Someone broke into my office last night. The surveillance tapes we had proof of Victor slapping Elena, they're gone." Elena froze, her breath caught in her throat. No, that was the only evidence. Margaret, holding the receiver, clenched her jaw. "Victor, he's covering his tracks." The principal whispered, "And that's not all. I found a note on my desk. It said, 'Stay out of this or lose more than your job.'" Margaret slammed the phone down, fury in her veins. He's crossing the line. Theft, threats, intimidation. He thinks he can erase the truth. Elena's hands shook as she clutched her belly. "He won't stop until he destroys me, or takes the baby." Her mother stepped close, gripping her shoulders. "Listen to me. I won't let that happen. We'll fight this harder, stronger. But you need to stay brave." Meanwhile, Victor sat in a private lounge, surrounded by his cronies. He laughed, sipping champagne as if nothing had happened. "The evidence is gone. Yes. Witnesses silenced. Yes. By the time this reaches trial, it'll be her word against mine. And guess who the world will believe? The billionaire philanthropist or the pregnant little liar?" The men chuckled, but one of the men's older business partner remained silent, unease etched on his face. Victor leaned in, sneering. "What? You have doubts?" The man cleared his throat. "Victor, destroying evidence, threatening people. This could backfire. You're making enemies in the wrong places." Victor's smirk widened. "Enemies? Please, I make the rules." "Lawson won't risk her career to save her daughter. And Elena. She's too weak to fight me." But deep down, a flicker of desperation burned. He wasn't just fighting to win. He was fighting to control. Back at Margaret's home, Elena's worst nightmare came alive. It was late evening. The house was quiet, the security guard making his rounds outside. Elena was sitting on the couch, trying to read when she noticed the patio door slightly ajar. Her breath caught. She had locked it earlier, slowly. She rose, clutching her phone. Her hands trembled as she whispered, "Mom." No answer. The creak of a floorboard behind her made her spin. A shadow moved in the hallway. Before she could scream, a masked figure stepped into view. Not Victor, but one of his hired men. Alina stumbled back, her heart pounding, one hand protectively over her stomach. The man's voice was low and menacing. "Mr. Harrington sends his regards." "You're coming with me?" Alina screamed. The guard burst inside, tackling the intruder to the ground. A brutal fight erupted. Shouts, fists, furniture crashing. Margaret rushed down the stairs, horror on her face as she saw the chaos. The guard finally overpowered the man, pinning him down until police sirens wailed outside. Alina, shaking, collapsed into Margaret's arms. He sent someone. "Wants the baby." Margaret held her close, fury blazing in her eyes. "Then this isn't just about a court case anymore. This is war. And he just made the worst mistake of his life." Hours later, the police confirmed the worst. The intruder confessed under pressure. Victor had hired him to scare Alina into reconsidering her testimony, but the man admitted. "Something darker," he said. "If she didn't come back to him willingly, we should make sure she never made it to court." Margaret's hands trembled as she listened, rage and fear twisting together. She knew then Victor was beyond redemption. He wasn't just an abusive husband. He was a criminal, predator, and he was willing to risk Alina's life to win. Victor, however, wasn't worried when the news reached him. He smirked, pouring himself another drink. So what? A hired hand got caught. There's no proof it leads back to me. Let Margaret rage all she wants. But in the end, she can't touch me. But for the first time, there was a flicker of doubt in his tone. Because deep down, Victor knew Margaret Lawson wasn't just a protective mother. She was a judge. And she had allies in places he couldn't control, and now she was coming for him. The house still reeked of chaos-shattered glass from the patio door, overturned furniture, and blood on the carpet from the intruder's split lip. Alina hadn't slept. All night, every creak of the house sent her clutching her stomach, whispering a prayer for her baby. Margaret, however, was wide awake and sharper than ever. She paced the living room, her robe trailing behind her, a phone pressed to her ear. "Yes, Chief. It's Judge Lawson. I want you to listen carefully. My daughter was attacked in her home tonight." The man confessed he was hired by Victor Harrington. She paused, her tone steel. "I don't want him just questioned. I want him investigated. Quietly, we'll need wiretaps, surveillance, the works. He thinks he's untouchable. Let's prove him wrong." Alina, overhearing, looked up with wide, exhausted eyes. "Mom, what are you doing?" Margaret turned, her expression softening for her daughter, but her voice carried fire. "He stole your mail. He destroyed evidence. He sent a man to your home. This isn't just abuse, it's organized crime. I'm going to build a case so strong, Victor will have nowhere to run." Alina trembled. What if he tries again?" "Oh, Margaret." Cupped her face. "Then we'll be ready, 'cause this time we set the trap." Days later, Victor strutted into his office tower, smug as ever. He had bribed a tech expert to lose digital copies of the surveillance tapes and silenced anyone who might testify. His lawyers reassured him that Alina had no solid proof left. "She's nothing without evidence." Victor sneered, adjusting. His tie, all bark, no bite. "The judge can rage all she wants, but in the end, this case will collapse." What Victor didn't know was that every call he made, every deal he struck, every arrogant laugh he uttered was being recorded. The FBI, working quietly under Margaret's push, tapped his phones and planted listening devices around his empire. For weeks he thought he was in control. In reality, he was digging his own grave with every word. Meanwhile, Margaret played the role of calm, measured judge in public. But behind closed doors, she was strategizing like a general in war. She met with Alina in her chambers late one evening. Stacks of papers lay on the desk, financial records, transaction receipts, anonymous statements from Victor's frightened employees. "Look at this," Margaret said, sliding a folder across. "He's been funneling money through shell companies. It's the same account used to pay off the thug who broke into our house. He thinks he covered his tracks, but he left crumbs. Alina blinked at the evidence, her heart racing. Not really. Have enough to take him down? Margaret leaned back, her eyes glinting. Not yet, but soon. You see, men like Victor don't just fall. They collapse under the weight of their own arrogance. And I'm going to let him hang himself with his own words. Victor, however, wasn't sitting still. One night, Alina received a chilling package. Inside was a torn ultrasound picture of her baby, the red ink scrawled across it. That child belongs to me. Elena's knees buckled as she dropped the photo, sobbing. Margaret rushed to her, fury blazing. That's it, Margaret hissed. No more waiting. She picked up the phone. Agent Wilson. Move forward with the sting. The sting unfolded like a chess game. Victor, confident in his invincibility, agreed to meet with one of his hired fixers to discuss taking care of Alina before the court date. What he didn't know was that his fixer had already flipped. Working with the FBI, they met in Victor's sleek black Bentley, parked in a deserted lot. Hidden microphones captured every word. Victor leaned close, his voice low and venomous. She's becoming a problem. If the judge pushes this case, we can't let Alina testify. Do whatever it takes. Money's no issue. Those words recorded and time-stamped sealed his fate. The next morning, Margaret sat at her kitchen table, sipping her coffee when her secure phone buzzed. She answered, her eyes narrowing. Judge Lawson, we have him. Everything's on tape. Orders to intimidate, evidence of bribery, threats against your daughter. He's finished. Margaret exhaled slowly, the weight of weeks lifting from her shoulders. She turned to Alina, who had been silently praying in the corner. Alina, she whispered, her voice steady and victorious. It's over. We have him. Alina broke down, tears streaming down her face. Relief, exhaustion, and hope all tangled. Together, for the first time, she believed her nightmare might actually end. But Margaret, though relieved, wasn't celebrating yet. She knew men like Victor fought hardest when cornered, and the courtroom showdown was still ahead. This, she thought, staring at the rising sun through the window, was just the beginning. The courthouse buzzed with whispers the morning of the trial. Cameras lined the marble steps, journalists craned their necks, and ordinary citizens gathered just to catch a glimpse. The scandal had leaked millionaire businessman accused of threatening pregnant wife. Victor Harrington stepped out of his sleek limousine, flanked by a team of high-priced attorneys. He wore a custom suit, his smirk firmly in place, waving at the cameras as though he were arriving at a charity gala, not his own reckoning. Alina, in contrast, arrived quietly through a side entrance with Margaret. She wore a simple dress, her hands protectively on her belly. Her face was pale, but her eyes carried a flicker of strength. Margaret squeezed her hand. Remember? Margaret whispered. The truth is your shield. And today, justice is ours. Inside the courtroom, Judge Harrison presided. He was stern but fair, a longtime colleague of Margaret's. He raised a brow as the attorneys filed in, his gavel bringing the room to order. Case of Harrington versus Lawson, he announced. Charges of abuse, intimidation, mail tampering, and conspiracy to commit harm. Prosecution. Are you ready? The lead prosecutor, a sharp woman named Rachel Carter, rose. Ready, Your Honor? The defense, led by Victor's celebrity attorney, smirked. We're ready as well. The trial began with opening statements. Rachel's voice cut through the silence. This is not a case of a simple domestic dispute. This is a case of power abused, laws broken, and threats made against the life of a woman and her unborn child. We will prove that Victor Harrington used intimidation, bribery, and violence to silence his wife, Alina Lawson Harrington. And we will prove that he thought himself untouchable till the law caught up with him. The defense shot back with smooth arrogance. Ladies and gentlemen, you will see today that this is nothing more than a bitter feud. A wealthy man, a troubled marriage, exaggerated claims fueled by a meddling mother-in-law who just so happens to be a judge. This case is built on spite, not fact. Victor smirked in his seat, confident the jury would be swayed. Alina took the stand first. Her hands trembled, but her voice grew steadier with each word. She described the night he struck her, the mail, tampering, the threats, and the chilling moment she received the ultrasound photo defaced with red ink. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. The defense tried to paint her as emotional, as unstable. "Mrs. Harrington, isn't it true you've been under stress due to pregnancy hormones?" Lena glared at them, her voice cracking but resolute. "Stress doesn't make someone break into my house. Stress doesn't hire men to hurt me. Husband did that." The jury leaned forward, sympathy etched in their faces, but the real fireworks began when Rachel Carter called her surprise witness, the FBI agent, Agent Wilson. Rachel said, "Can you please describe the surveillance operation conducted on Victor Harrington?" The defense leapt up. "Objection. Surprise evidence." Judge Harrison fixed them with a glare. "Overruled. Proceed." The jury's eyes widened as Wilson revealed audio transcripts. On the screen, words appeared, Victor's words recorded. "In his Bentley, she's becoming a problem. If the judge pushes this case, we can't let Alina testify. Do whatever it takes." "Money's no issue?" The courtroom erupted. Reporters scribbled furiously, flashes from cameras nearly blinding. Alina gasped, tears streaming as she heard her husband order her silence. Victor's face drained of color. For the first time, his smirk faltered. The defense scrambled. This could be doctored, fabricated. But Wilson calmly produced timestamps, forensic evidence, and chain of custody reports. Everything was airtight. Rachel turned to the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, you don't have to take Mrs. Harrington's word alone. You don't even have to take mine. You've heard it from the defendant's own mouth. He threatened his wife. He conspired to silence her. And he endangered not only her life, but the life of an innocent child." Margaret watched from her seat, her hands clasped tightly. For weeks, she had fought in the shadows to set this trap, and now it had sprung. She leaned toward Alina, whispering with quiet triumph, "The rope he tied is now around his own neck." As the session ended for the day, Victor was escorted out, rage twisting his features. He turned, his voice echoing through the chamber. "This isn't over. I own this city. You hear me? I own it." Judge Harrison's gavel slammed down. Order. Order. But the damage was done. The jury had seen him unmasked not as a powerful man, but as a desperate bully, cornered and furious. And for the first time, Victor Harrington knew he was losing. The courthouse was electric the following morning. The trial had become the city's obsession, news anchors breathlessly covering every detail. Hashtags trending online, and protesters with signs chanting outside, "Justice for Alina, no more power for abusers." Inside, Victor sat. At the defense table, jaw clenched, eyes dark with fury, his attorneys whispered frantically, but his mind was elsewhere. He knew the jury had heard enough. To bury him, his empire, his name, his freedom, it was all slipping away. He leaned toward his lead lawyer, hissing, "If they convict me, I'll burn everything. Everyone, you hear me? Everyone goes down with me." The prosecution called its final witness, a former Harrington employee named Daniel Reyes. He was a quiet man, nervously tugging at his tie. "Mr. Reyes," Rachel Carter asked gently, "can you explain why you chose to come forward today?" Daniel's voice shook, but he pushed on. "I worked for Mr. Harrington for 7 years. I saw things. Bribes, intimidation, money laundering. But what made me come forward was Alina. I saw how he treated her, how he threatened her. And when I heard she was pregnant, I couldn't stay silent anymore." Victor slammed his fist on the table, startling everyone. "Lies. All of it lies." Judge Harrison banged his gavel. "One more outburst, Mr. Harrington, and I'll hold you in contempt." Victor sat back, seething, but the damage was irreversible. The jury had seen his temper, unfiltered, during cross-examination. The defense tried to shred Daniel's credibility. "We're fired, weren't you? Isn't this revenge?" Daniel shook his head. "I wasn't fired. I quit, because I couldn't watch him destroy people anymore." He then revealed damning documents, hidden ledgers Victor thought destroyed, bribery, payments, illegal contracts, and coded notes about Alina herself. The courtroom gasped. Even some of Victor's supporters lowered their eyes in shame. At recess, Victor was led to a holding room. His hands trembled not from fear, but from rage. He grabbed his phone, ignoring the guard's warning, when a shadowy voice answered. On the other end, Victor whispered, "It's time. If they convict me, you know what to do." The line went silent for a moment. Then the voice replied coldly, "Understood." Victor hung up, a sinister smirk creeping back. He wasn't going. Down alone, back in the courtroom. Closing arguments began. Rachel Carter's words burned like fire. This trial isn't about wealth. It isn't about power. It's about a woman's right to live free from fear. It's about justice for Alani and for every woman silenced by men who think money can erase crime. Don't let him buy his way out of this. Don't let his threats win. Show him that in this country, no one is above the law. The jury's eyes glistened with determination. The defense countered with desperation. My client is being demonized because he is rich, because he is successful. These accusations are exaggerated, these witnesses unreliable. This is not justice, vengeance. But even his words rang hollow. The jury had already made up their minds. As the judge dismissed the jury to deliberate, Alina clutched Margaret's hand. Her face was pale. "Do you think they'll really convict him?" she whispered. Margaret's eyes stayed fixed on Victor, who sat with a predator's grin. "They will. But I fear he's planning something worse if they do." And Margaret was right, because in Victor's mind, the verdict wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The courtroom was silent. Hours had passed, and every second felt like an eternity. The jury's absence weighed heavily, tension crackling like a storm ready to break. Alina sat frozen, her hands folded protectively over her swollen belly. Margaret sat beside her, stone-faced but alert, like a judge even outside her robe. Rachel Carter stood pacing, whispering notes to herself, though her eyes kept darting toward Victor. And Victor. He sat unnervingly calm. His lawyer whispered nervously, but Victor ignored him. He leaned back, smiling faintly, as if he already knew the outcome. Finally, the bailiff announced, "Jury has reached a verdict." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The jurors filed in, eyes heavy but resolute. The foreman, a middle-aged woman with a steady voice, stood and handed the slip of paper to Judge Harrison. The judge unfolded it, scanning quickly before handing it back. "On the charge of aggravated assault, how do you find the defendant?" Foreman spoke clearly, "Guilty." The room exploded. Reporters scribbled furiously. Spectators gasped. Alina broke into tears. And Margaret squeezed her hand tight. Judge Harrison banged the gavel. "Order! Order in the court!" But the foreman wasn't done. "On the charge of attempted coercion of a public official, guilty. On the charge of financial fraud, guilty. And on the charge of conspiracy, guilty." Every word struck like a hammer. Victor Harrington, the untouchable millionaire, was guilty on all counts. Victor's smirk never faltered. Instead, he chuckled, a low, chilling laugh. "Guilty. Guilty. Do you sheep even realize what you've done?" he hissed. Alina stared at him in disbelief. "You monster. You're finished." But Victor leaned forward, eyes gleaming with venom. Double quotes. "No, Alina, you are." At that moment, chaos erupted. A loud bang shook the courthouse. People screamed as smoke filled the hallway outside. The bailiffs rushed toward the doors, but another explosion followed, glass shattering, alarms blaring. Victor calmly stood, straightening his expensive suit as panic consumed the room. "You think prison can hold me? I built this city's power structure. Half of them owe me, the other half fear me." He looked directly at Alina. "And when I walk out of here, you'll beg for mercy." Margaret sprang to her feet, positioning herself between Victor and Walsa. "Alina," her judge's authority thundered in her voice. "Bailiff, secure the defendant. Now." But Victor's men were already moving shadowy figures in the smoke. Armed, disrupting the chaos, Alina clung to her mother-in-law, heart racing, tears streaming. He planned this. He planned everything. Rachel Carter pulled Alina down. Behind a bench as gunfire echoed, "Stay low. Don't move." Victor was laughing now, striding toward the smoke-filled exit. This trial was amusing. But I have bigger games to play. But just as he reached the door, a shot rang out, not from his men, but from a U.S. Marshal stationed nearby. Victor staggered, clutching his shoulder, roaring in pain. His men panicked, firing wildly, but the marshals and bailiffs closed in. Fast, the standoff turned into a bloody struggle. Screams filled the air. Porters hid under tables. And then, in the middle of the chaos, Victor turned back one last time, eyes burning into Elena's soul. "This isn't over," he bellowed. "I will destroy you." He was tackled to the ground, shackled, and dragged away, cursing violently as sirens blared in the distance. When the smoke finally cleared, the courthouse was wrecked but standing. Alina was shaken, trembling, but alive. "Da-da!" Margaret held her tightly, whispering, "It's over, my dear. It's over. You're safe now." But Alina wasn't so sure. Victor's words echoed in her ears, like a dark prophecy. This isn't over, and in her heart, she knew. He would stop at nothing to come back for. Her, the courthouse had barely calmed after the chaos. Victor was dragged away, injured but still raging, while Alina was escorted under heavy protection to a secure safe house arranged by the marshals. But that night, as rain poured across the city, Alina couldn't sleep. She kept replaying Victor's last words in her mind. This isn't over. Margaret sat nearby, her usually steely demeanor softened. She reached out, brushing Elena's hair back. "You've been through hell, my dear. But tomorrow, Victor will be transferred to federal custody. His empire is finished." Alina nodded, but unease still gnawed at her. Victor wasn't a man who accepted defeat, and she was right. At 2 a.m., the safe house alarms blared. Shadows moved. In the storm outside, armed men surrounded the building, their weapons gleaming in flashes of lightning. The marshals reacted instantly, barricading windows and returning fire. "It's Harrington's men. They're trying to extract him. Lanus." Heart pounded. He planned this. He knew the verdict wouldn't stop him. Amid the chaos, a chilling voice crackled through a loudspeaker outside. "Alina, you thought you won today. But I always collect what's mine." It was Victor. He had somehow escaped during transport, orchestrating the entire ambush. Inside, panic escalated. The marshals tried to usher Alina and Margaret to the basement, but Victor's men breached the side door. Bullets tore through the walls. Margaret, despite her age, stood her ground, her eyes blazing. "If he wants my daughter-in-law, he'll have to go through me first." Alina, trembling but resolute, gripped her mother-in-law's hand. "No. We end this tonight. He can't keep haunting us." Rachel Carter, the prosecutor who had refused to abandon them, pulled a pistol from her holster and handed it to Alina. "You've been a victim long enough. If he gets in here, you fight." Standoff stretched into the early hours. Rain hammered the roof, thunder roared, and Victor's men pressed closer. Then, with a deafening crash, Victor himself stormed through the front, soaked in rain. Blood seeping from his earlier wound, but his fury unbroken. "Alina," he shouted, eyes wild. "You humiliated me, stole my power. But now you'll crawl back, begging, or you and that brat you carry won't live to see daylight." Elena's fear melted into rage.
Ow.
For months, she had endured his cruelty, his violence, his threats. But now, something inside her snapped. "No, Victor," she said, stepping forward with the pistol trembling in her hand. "You don't own me. You never did. And you will never hurt my child," Victor sneered, advancing slowly, despite the guns trained on him. "You think you can stop me? You're weak. That's why you needed my money, my name." Bang! The gunshot silenced the storm. Victor staggered, eyes wide, staring at Alina in disbelief. She had pulled the trigger. Blood blossomed across his chest, and for the first time, the mighty Victor Harrington looked powerless, broken. He collapsed to the floor, gasping. His last words were a whisper, filled with venom. Yule. Regret.